I love this job. Not just because we are at this great Tish WNET studio here in the heart of New York City, but we also have great guests like Adrian Carrasquillo, who is the editor of Latino coverage at BuzzFeed News. By the way, for those who don't know what BuzzFeed is,
BuzzFeed's a social news and entertainment site. You know, it was first sort of came up when people got a lot of attention for cat photos and videos and stuff like that. And it's a site that has added news and added a lot of political coverage and things like that to, and obviously cover the 2016 election.
All right, Latino coverage. Mm-hmm. How many Latinos are there in the United States?
There are 50 million. You know,
how many are eligible to vote?
There's going to be about 27 million that are going to be like eligible. In 2012, it was about 11 million that voted.
It's growing.
And yeah, and this year there's expected to be about 13 million that will vote.
So, as we're doing this program in May 2016, although after and maybe even after the election. So here's my question: the connection between Donald Trump and the Latino community, a complex one?
I don't think it's that complex, but there are a couple things that are important to keep in mind. You know, when Donald Trump announced, he talked about, he sort of disparaged, and people took it offensively, that he talked about Mexicans being criminals and rapists and things like that. So
did he? He says it wasn't that. Was he misinterpreted? He says it was illegals from Mexico. You say?
A lot of people who are Hispanic took it as an affront and an attack on them, and sort of saying that. You know, in my role as a journalist, I wanted to cover the news. I think that if you look at, for example, the 2012 election with Mitt Romney, some of the things that he said on immigration were perceived to be taken the wrong way, and so you had Trump going way beyond that, and so that was kind of the situation where people were like, you know, he's saying some stuff. Now it got him a lot of attention, got him a lot of votes, because people who want to be strong on immigration said, you know what, I like this guy. He's shooting from the hip. On the other hand, his favorability with Hispanics nationally just tumbled.
I heard him say many times. I heard him say, Latinos love me. They love me.
He does say Hispanics love him. He does love to use that line. You know, he got very excited when in Nevada the entrance polls for a caucus are very unreliable. You basically are catching people when they're coming into a caucus, which is much different than a primary. And so they showed that he won the Hispanic vote, and he's been excited since then because, you know, he thinks he's going to win the Hispanic vote. The reality is that the percentage of people that are Hispanic that are Republican is a much smaller percentage. So he's winning among this really small percent. And Democrats have in the last few election cycles been getting more and more.
So if he's the Republican nominee, let's assume for a second, fast forward, he's Republican nominee, runs against Hillary Clinton, what percentage of the Hispanic vote does he get?
You know, honestly, if you wanted me to pick a number, I think it would be somewhere in the 15 to 20% range. And so you have to remember that, so here's the thing. Places like Pew Hispanic will talk about what percentage of Hispanics are Republican. And it's about a 15 to 20% range. And these are people that are pretty strongly Republican.
So he gets all of them?
Well, I mean, you know, the thing is that Obama got 71% of the Latino vote, and that's really high. And that number has been going up. Yeah. And so I think for a while, you know, maybe Clinton folks were thinking if we were in the 75 range, that'd be great. I mean, if they're in the 80 range or 85, that's huge.
Do you think more Latinos, Hispanics have decided to become naturalized, to hey, I'm in because of this?
I did the first story on that. I went to Nevada, and I was hearing from a lot of people that what they said was, you know, people who had been here 15 years, 30 years, and then they said, well, why are you registering now? Why are you naturalizing now to register to vote? And they said, because to vote against Trump. And I spoke with 4 women who are part of the culinary union in Nevada, a very influential union out there, and they work for Trump. They work in Trump's hotel. And they are naturalizing so they can vote against him.
Wow. Yeah. Is it all about Trump, or are there any other quote-unquote issues that matter from your perspective to the Hispanic
what they always talk about is immigration is a passion point. It's an issue that people understand. People, you know, there's mixed status families where someone's a U.S. citizen and someone's undocumented within the same family. But so they don't like, Hispanics don't like people talking super negatively about immigration. But like most Americans, jobs in the economy, healthcare, often will be ahead of immigration. It's just that immigration always becomes the issue that people talk about when it comes to Hispanics.
Hispanics are spoken about as a monolithic entity. But but there are Hispanics from Puerto Rico. There are Hispanics from Cuba. There are Hispanics from the Dominican Republic. And a bunch of other places. Central America. Has great impact. All these places where people come from has a great impact, or does it not have a great impact on their political ideology?
I mean, that's the thing. The Hispanic community is not monolithic. About 66% of Hispanics are Mexican, so about 2/3. And so that, Mexican American, there's a little bit more, of a unified front on there. But there's a lot of different countries that Hispanics come from. We're here in New York, where there's a lot of Dominicans and there's a lot of Puerto Ricans. And so in different places, for example, in Florida, where there's a lot of Puerto Ricans, statehood issue of Puerto Rico is becoming more of an issue. And in South Florida, for a long time, there's been the issue of Cuba. And now they're opening up and relaxing the embargo. So different groups have different issues that they care about. And then, of course, when you look nationally, I think where we saw the immigration issue become sort of a unifying thing was where people talked about Arizona's law a few years ago. That was very stringent immigration law. And people said, well, I'm not from there, or, I don't have that issue, an immigration issue, but they could sort of see the lines that were being drawn, which is like, if you're pulling someone over, are you pulling them over because you know that they're here illegally, or are you pulling them over because they're Hispanic? And so then people felt that sort of went a bit too far.
From your perspective, in covering these issues for a while now, who would you say some of the most prominent leaders in the Hispanic community are?
That what you're asking actually gets to a point where, in the Black community, for example, if something happens that's it's crazy, you'll see Jesse Jackson, you'll see Al Sharpton, and there aren't these national Latino leaders because people come from different geographic
Henry
places.
Cisneros matter much?
In different places, right? So Henry Cisneros from San Antonio, like Julian Castro and Joaquin Castro now. So it depends, right? And then you'll have like a Mario Diaz-Balart in Florida, who's Cuban. So it's kind of more, they're leaders in their own communities, but there's not like a national leader in that way,
Does that matter?
I think that if you talk to a lot of Hispanic leaders, it does matter because their issues are not front and center, right? So if some sort of tragedy happens and Sharpton goes down there, the cameras follow him, right? And then he gets to make that a national issue. So I feel like in those ways, that's where people feel that they wish that there was more of a Latino leader.
So in New Jersey, where I'm from, Robert Menendez, Senator Menendez, dealing with some issues with the federal government, right? A few seconds left. Does that matter to the Hispanic community?
I think that Bob Menendez is obviously going through his legal issues. I think that before that, he might have been considered a vice presidential pick, because he's been around for a while and kind of gets to the point of what you're talking about, where there's not Hispanic leaders that have been around for a while, and that's why someone like Julian Castro is elevated, even though he's young, and they say this could be the future because there's not a lot of leaders out there.
Adrian, finally, where can people check out your stuff?
BuzzFeed.com and on Facebook and Twitter.
Listen, thank you for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me.
Keep us posted. We'll have a continued conversation about this very important issue dealing with a growing community that's voting more and more, which is important. Thank you. Stay with us. We'll be right back right after this from Lincoln Center here and at the Tisch WNET studio. Thank you.
Appreciate it, sir.
One on One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 25 years of broadcast excellence. This special edition of One on One with Steve Adubato is brought to you from the Tisch WNET studios at Lincoln Center. Funding has been provided by Bank of America, New Jersey City University, ADP, the Russell Berry Foundation, PSE&G, Qualcare Inc., and by New Jersey Sharing Network. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.